Three, two, one. Welcome to Bellwether. Thank you for joining this week. We're going to talk about communication today. And I know I've talked about communication on the show a few times because it's fundamental to being successful in the new economy. It's fundamental to being successful at work. It's fundamental to a lot of different things. But there's a special aspect of communication I want to focus on today, and that's communicating to the C-suite. I've been thinking about doing this podcast for a long time, and I've had so much information on how to effectively communicate at that extremely senior level that it was extremely difficult for me to narrow it down. But I'm going to do it today anyway. I'm going to keep it hopefully under 20 minutes. My background before I became a coach, much of my time was spent in executive communications. And there is a missed opportunity for many people to really approach communication in the right way. This is an ultimate differentiator for how you want to evolve your career, move up in an organization. If you're able to communicate well at the C-suite level, your runway is extremely long. Because when we think about the C-suite, and I've talked before about getting you ready for the C-suite, the mindset that comes with it, the communication aspect, we know that most of those people don't have time to really focus on you. They don't have time to focus on all these different areas. They need to know what's in front of them, what decision needs to be made, and they move on. So when you can do this effectively to get them to make effective decisions quickly and lay the groundwork for them to do that, make a foundation for them to make their lives easier, you are an angel in their eyes, and you are going to be in their good favor, and that is a great thing for when bonuses and promotions come around. So here's what I'm going to break this down for you today. One is proper preparation to communicate to the C-suite. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Then I'm going to give you the filter that I walk most of my clients through. I give them a little need to know and want to know filter that we can put all of your communications through, because we've got different levels of communication and we don't want people from the C-suite looking under the hood because they ask really good questions. And the second you don't have a good answer to one of those questions, you're going to have a bad day. So we want to keep it pretty elevated. So this is going to be more of a teaching podcast, but you can use this beyond the C-suite. You can use this for anything that you're looking to communicate. If you run a community organization, you're thinking about your clients and emails, and everyone is communicating all of the time and receiving so much information. This is the filter to get you to communicate effectively. I just put the C-suite on there to bring a little hook in there. But you can use this for anything. So number one, we're going to start with is preparation. Communication takes preparation. It takes a lot of preparation. To do it well, you have to prepare. There's a saying, sorry I wrote you a long email. I didn't have time to write you a short one. And that's what communication's all about. Normally we just fire things off, clang, 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 and we're communicating out, and we expect people to filter through and do the filtering on their own. Your job as a communicator is to do that filtering for them. And now when we think about a communication model, I'm going to explain how communication really works. Communication model goes like this. You send information and someone receives it. Then that person receives it and they send information back. And it's sent over a medium. It could be email, it could be voice, it could be phone, it could be a little podcast thing or a video thing, whatever. And everyone receiving it has context. So the way that people receive this information may not be the way you intended to send it. And so that's how a communication model works. So your job as the sender of information is to take in all of that information and try to make it as clear as possible. It's why it's so difficult to do it on Twitter with 140 or 280 characters, whatever it is. But when we think about the C-suite and the context of what they're dealing with and where what you're presenting is sitting within that context, your job is to do the thinking for them. Your job is to prepare whatever it is that you're sending them in a way that they're going to be able to pick it up extremely quickly. So when you want to make them pick up what you're putting down, they're too busy to focus, get context, do all of this within 30 minutes. You should be doing that work for them so that they can hit the ground running. And so your first filter in preparing for communication to the C-suite is, this is what I'm telling you, and this is where it fits in the bigger picture of everything else that we're doing. There are multiple audiences in a C-suite. And so when we want to give a bigger picture story and how what you're trying to say fits into that bigger picture, we think about it in the context of whatever it is. A CEO is going to be thinking about different things than the chief legal officer, is going to be thinking about different things than the chief marketing officer, the chief strategy officer, all of these different types of people. So what are they going to be focused on, and why is this important for them? So when we prepare, we have to think about it through their lens and say, why is this important? I've done the thinking for you, and this is it. But beyond that, we have to think about the different levels of communication and the different levels of thinking. And we've talked about this on the show before of you have really strategic, high-level macro thinking, right? This is, I'm thinking 10 years in the future, and this is where the organization is going to be, and this is what's important for the organization and where the industry is going to go, and all of these different types of things. Great. Then there's the little detail of I've got 5,000 pages of Excel lines and I'm going through all this detail and I know so much little detail. C-suite doesn't care about that. And there's a scale in between. So how do we get ourselves to that headline level to say, don't worry about the detail. I want you to only to think about the headlines, and that's where I'm going to focus today. And so that's what I'm going to talk about next. So in your preparation, we have to put these filters on what it is that we're looking to communicate, because you don't get to the C-suite without asking really good questions. And when we think about these different levels of communication and different levels and ways to think about communication, if you keep it strategic, great. You're bringing them on a little story of where you want their thinking to stay so that you can communicate really effectively. When that starts to unravel, and we've all seen it happen, and the person starts picking back and peeling back the onion and say, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? If you don't have good enough answers, they're going to dig more, and they're going to dig more. And that's how a meeting gets derailed. That's how communication gets derailed. And it's the same with clients. It's the same with people who report to you. It's the same with anybody that you're trying to communicate with. We need to keep it elevated, high level, so that we can get them on the fast track to getting a decision made. The more details they want, the more difficult it's going to be. But that's part of the preparation, is to prepare for what questions they're going to have. We're going to cover that in a minute. So how do you prepare for the C-suite? When we think about what we're communicating, let's say you run a marketing division, or you run, business management or operations or whatever. You're communicating up to this senior level, C-suite, board level, whatever it is. Two things we have to communicate. And here are the filters that I want you to do. One is, what do they need to know? And never put in more than three things. Okay, that's it. What do they need to know? So as you're preparing whatever it is that you're communicating up, it's a PowerPoint deck, it's an email, it's whatever. Never more than three things. What do they need to know to make whatever it is decision that they're looking to do? What's the purpose of the meeting, the email, whatever it is that you're doing to waste their time? How do you not waste their time? What do they need to know for whatever it is that you're doing? Okay, that's number one. And number two, in your preparation, I want you to think about, what do you want them to know? And that's not necessarily going to be through words. Okay, so I'm going to break this out. So number one, what do they need to know? What's the purpose of this email, this presentation, whatever it is that you're doing? What do they need to know to make a decision? Pick out your three things. We want to filter through to share these two sides. So is this a decision? Is it an update you're making? Are you making a case for one side versus another? Keep it only to that. Okay, keep it extremely focused on, this is what you need to know because this is what we're doing. Never more than three things. And that's filter number one. Okay. Number two is, what do you want them to know? And this is the really good, that's really tactical, right? The three things you need to know. You can figure that out pretty quickly. It's not too difficult. But here's the good part, is what do you want them to know? And this is what most people don't think about in preparing for communicating to the C-suite, is what do you want them to know that's not going to be done with words? Okay? Probably one of the things you want them to know is, I got this. Right? Or one of the things that you might want them to know is that there is a best choice, but you can't quite say it. So how do you bring in that nuance to your communication to say, I'm an effective leader, or I want you to pick this one, or I want my team to be dedicated to this? Whatever. There are these things that kind of float in the air that you want people to pick up, but you can't quite say it directly. That's what you want them to know. That's part of your preparation process to communicating to the C-suite. Okay, it's not the primary purpose of the meeting. It's not the primary purpose of the email. It's not the primary purpose of whatever. But there is this level that you want to communicate, maybe with words, maybe not. It's up to you, that you want to drive home. And that's one of the things that you should be focused on in terms of your preparation. So those are the two. So we start with the way to communicate to the C-suite is one, proper preparation, 100%. Do all of this in advance. Number two, as part of that preparation, you figure out what do they need to know, because you are communicating something very specific, never more than 3 things. Sometimes it's only 1. Okay? Keep it short, sweet, simple, less than 20 words, whatever. You need to know this to make this decision. Here is the valuable, tangible evidence or information that you need to make an effective decision, right? There's going to be a problem. There's going to be this. This is really good. Competitors doing whatever. Okay? Bang, bang, bang. That's what they need to know. What do you want them to know? Communicate clearly. Okay? May not be in words. Maybe this is how you present yourself. Maybe it's this other type of information you could kind of speak in a little bit of a circle to say, I can't quite say it, but this is what I'm trying to tell you. After that, you have one other third step in preparing. Is what do you want to avoid talking about with them? Okay, and these are what questions are they going to have? What objections are they going to have? This is, when you think about something in sales, what objections are clients going to have and what are your answers for that? This is the type of preparation to say, what's coming at me that I need to deflect? And what are you going to deflect in this conversation with the C-suite? So we could pretty much anticipate, if we're thinking about where they're sitting in the organization, chief strategy officer, chief legal officer, chief whatever, they're going to have specific questions based on their world and what they're thinking about and what's important to them. We should be preparing for those questions in advance, because that's when you start to show your real value, to show that you've already done the thinking for them. They will eventually stop asking you questions over time because they will begin to trust you. And there are certain things that you're going to want to avoid in a meeting where this question's coming and it's going to derail. You can have an answer for that to say, I expected that question. We don't have a satisfactory answer yet. We're working on it. Let's not waste the time today, and I'm going to get you the answer by X date. Okay, what are the things that you want to avoid? Have a plan for all 3 of those. Questions, objections, and what you want to avoid. Plan for all 3 of those before you go into a meeting so that you can anticipate and show that you've already thought about that. That should be typically sufficient for your C-suite person to at least start building up the trust, because that's what we want to do. That's the ideal purpose of good, effective communication, is not just to get them to make good decisions. It's also to make you look good. And I'm in the business of making you look good. That's what I want to do. You don't have to have all the answers, but you just got to look good, and then people will believe it. That's it, right? This is beyond just C-suite. Flip it around you. It's for the people on your team. What do they need to know? What do you want them to know? That you're the boss. What about clients? What about a sales presentation? What about, a podcast, whatever. What are the things you want them to know? What do you need? What do they need to know? I'm not going to tell you what I want you to know about me, but hopefully I'm communicating it. We'll see. So that's it. That's communicating to the C-suite in a nutshell. I'll probably do more on it in my next book. I don't know. I'll get really into the nitty-gritty, but that's your framework. Prepare properly. That includes email. Okay, don't just fire it off to the CEO saying, I was thinking about this and it's 3 pages long. They're not going to read it. Okay, what do they need to know? How are you communicating it in a way of things that you want them to know, like you're really effective at your job, whatever it is? And what are you prepared for in terms of, the things that are going to make it go sideways, and we want to avoid sideways. That's it. So there's a quick 14 minutes, 15 minutes. I hope it was helpful. If you're listening to this while you're running, keep going. Listen to the next podcast, because you can go 30 minutes, 45 minutes to an hour. And I want to thank everyone for listening. As always, reach out to me. I can get your team to communicate in the most effective manner possible. There's lots of nuance, and we can do it. So reach out, as always, bellwetherhub.com. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful and productive week. Thanks.